The scream lodged in my throat like a living thing, silent and furious, even as the boiling water struck my arm. What I heard wasn't my own voice but the vicious hiss of liquid meeting flesh. The sound of instant cellular betrayal. Pain exploded behind my eyes, a white, hot supernova that consumed everything: the peeling linoleum, the humming refrigerator, the morning sun I no longer recognized. For one terrible moment, the entire kitchen vanished into a universe of pure agony. Then came his voice, slicing through the haze with surgical precision. "There. Maybe that'll shut you up for good." My son Julian stood over me, the empty saucepan still gripped in his white, knuckled fist. His face wasn't twisted with rage. That would have been easier to bear. Instead, it wore a mask of cold, wary impatience. The expression of a man swatting a fly that had buzzed too long around his head. "God, Julian, look at the mess." His wife Chloe's shriek pierced the air, but her eyes weren't on my blistering arm. They were fixed on the puddles spreading across her pristine kitchen floor. "Now I'll have to mop. You see what you do." She spat the words at me like venom. "You just had to provoke him, didn't you? Always stirring the pot, always needing attention. We feed you. We give you a roof over your head. And for what? So you can be a miserable old hag." Her lip curled in perfect disgust. "Why don't you do us all a favor and just go die somewhere else? Honestly, Eleanor, nobody gives a damn." I stared at her, my face numb, my mind strangely detached from the fire consuming my arm. She stood with arms crossed, a queen surveying a stain on her kingdom. In the corner, my 6-year-old grandson Arya sat frozen at his small table, tiny fingers wrapped around a carton of apple juice. His eyes were dark and bottomless wells of confusion as he tried to reconcile the grandmother, who read him bedtime stories, with the creature his parents had just branded. I wanted to run to him, to whisper that everything would be all right, but the lie wouldn't form. Nothing was all right. My arm throbbed, angry and screaming red against pale skin, blisters already rising like malevolent pearls. I looked from the burn to the two faces of my tormentors. My own flesh and blood, and the woman he'd chosen over me. They were a united front of contempt, ready to discard me like burnt toast from a meal I had cooked but was never thanked for. A profound and terrifying calm settled over me. I said nothing, I didn't cry, I didn't scream back, I simply turned, gripped the edge of the granite countertop, the one I'd picked out 20 years ago, and pulled myself upright. I walked out of the kitchen with measured steps, each one an act of will. No one followed, no one asked if I was hurt. I passed the living room where the armchair I'd once rocked Arya in sat empty. I passed the hallway where a faint pencil mark still showed how tall Julian was at 10, the day he'd run to me crying after falling from his bike. "Mama," he'd sobbed. The word had once been a prayer, a comfort, a name that belonged to me. Now it was just a sound hollowed out and meaningless. I reached my room. The small guest room, not the master bedroom I'd once shared with my husband, and closed the door softly behind me. The lock's click was the sound of a final decision. I slid down the cool wood until I was huddled on the floor, the throbbing pain in my arm a distant drumbeat to the chilling silence from the other side. They wanted me gone, and in the sterile clarity that follows immense pain, I realized I was finally ready to leave, but not in the way they imagined. Not as a ghost, but as the owner. For years, I had made myself small. I had folded my opinions, my needs, my very presence into neat, unobtrusive squares to fit inside the house I had built. The house Arthur and I had poured our souls into long before Chloe's designer shoes ever clicked across its floors. They had forgotten that. They saw me as a relic, a piece of antique furniture with nowhere else to go. They were catastrophically wrong. With resolve that felt foreign yet deeply familiar, I stood, cradling my burned arm, and walked to the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Buried beneath my late husband's wool sweaters, beneath the scent of mothballs and memory, was a slim leather-bound portfolio. My hands were perfectly steady as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in felt, was the original title deed to the house, dated 1989. The ink was crisp, the official seal of Lincoln County, Oregon, embossed and clear, and there was my name, Eleanor Vance, in bold, undeniable print. Sole owner, they never asked. They just assumed. They assumed my love was a contract of surrender. I closed the portfolio, placed it on the bed, and began to pack. A small overnight bag, a few changes of clothes, my toiletries, a framed photo of Arthur with his smile that still made my heart ache. I moved with quiet, methodical grace, a lifetime of cleaning up other people's messes distilled into this one final, liberating act. When I zipped the bag, the house was submerged in heavy silence. They had retreated to their room, cocooned in their cruelty, content in the belief that I was in mine, weeping and broken. I stepped into the hallway, bag in one hand, portfolio in the other. I walked past their closed door without a glance. The burn on my arm pulsed with every step, but my spine was straighter than it had been in a decade. As I opened the front door, cool, misty Oregon night air rushed in, and it smelled like freedom. They wanted me gone, so I was gone. But I was not empty-handed. I was not broken. I was Eleanor Vance, and I was taking the roof with me. The bus groaned through the damp, winding roads of the Oregon Coast Range, its headlights cutting feeble swaths through thick fog. I sat in the back, my worn leather bag on my lap, my burned arm tucked carefully inside my coat. The windows were slick with condensation, blurring the towering silhouettes of Douglas firs into dark, watching specters. I was invisible, just another old woman running from something, or perhaps finally toward it. I got off in Cedar Creek, a town so small and forgotten it felt like it existed in a different decade. A place Julian and Chloe had never bothered to visit, a footnote in a life I'd lived long before them. It was a town of moss-covered roofs and a single traffic light that blinked yellow after 9 p.m. I walked the 4 blocks from the bus stop to the cottage Arthur and I had bought in our 30s. A rustic little place tucked away on a parcel of land thick with cedars and wild rhododendrons. We'd poured the concrete for the foundation ourselves, his rough, steady hands guiding mine. His fingerprints were embedded in the very bones of this place. The gate shrieked its familiar rusty protest. The key was still under the 3rd terracotta pot, exactly where I'd left it 20 years ago. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cold wood, dried herbs, and memory. I flipped a switch and a single dusty bulb flickered to life, illuminating a room frozen in time. The furniture was draped in white shrouds, ghosts of a life I'd put on pause. I sat on the edge of the bed we had once shared, the mattress sighing under my weight. This cottage, this land, it was all mine, paid for with overtime shifts as a nurse and Arthur's long weekends at the timber mill. We had dreams for this place, a sprawling garden, a workshop for him, a porch swing for me. Then cancer came for him, swift and silent as coastal fog, and the dreams were packed away with his clothes. When Julian married Chloe, it had seemed like a sensible, loving thing to do, letting them move into the big house in Port Blossom. They were just starting out. The house was too large for just me. I'd willingly moved into the smaller bedroom, surrendering the master suite, the heart of the home. I became their live-in cook, cleaner, and babysitter, all for the unspoken price of my own erasure. I remembered Chloe's first day. She'd walked in, nose wrinkled at the scent of old books and lemon polish. "We'll need to renovate," she'd announced. Not to me, but to Julian, running a manicured finger over the windowsill as if checking for flaws in my life's work. Soon, Eleanor became, she. "Tell her not to use my good towels. Why is she always humming? Does she have to sit with us during dinner?" Julian, my son, never once defended me. He stood by, a silent accomplice, his spine dissolving under the heat of his wife's contempt. But I had told myself it was fine, that this was the price of family. I was a fool, but even fools have their limits. In the back of the cedar wardrobe, past Arthur's old flannel shirts, was a small fireproof safe. I spun the combination, the numbers a familiar prayer on my fingertips. Inside, next to our wedding album, was a second portfolio containing the deed to this cottage and the land it sat on, plus a stack of bank statements for an account they never knew existed. An account I'd fed for 22 years with quiet, stubborn persistence. My name, Eleanor Vance, was on every single page. They hadn't just forgotten who owned the house. They had forgotten who I was. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a burden. I was a builder, a provider, the architect of the very life they had so casually tried to dismantle. I held the deeds in my hands, the paper cool and solid. It wasn't just proof of ownership. It was proof of my existence. The next morning, after a restless night listening to wind whisper through the cedars, I looked up a number I hadn't dialed in 15 years. Ruth Bennett. Now Isabel Morrow, having taken her husband's name. But I knew the fire in her would be the same. My best friend from nursing school, sharp, ferocious, and loyal to a fault. I'd heard she'd left nursing, gone to law school late in life, and now specialized in something called elder rights. I dialed. After 3 rings, a voice, crisp and professional, "Answer, Isabel Morrow." There was a long pause after I said my name, then a soft gasp. "Ully, my God, Eleanor Vance, is that really you? Are you all right?" "I've been better, Uzzy," I said, my voice steadier than expected. But I'm still standing and I need a lawyer. You don't need a lawyer, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You need a friend with a law degree. I'm on my way. Whatever it is, we'll burn it to the ground together. Just like that. A bridge to my past appeared, not to retreat across, but to bring reinforcements. The storm was coming for Julian and Chloe, and I, Eleanor Vance, was the storm. Isabel arrived 3 days later, her sensible sedan kicking up a cloud of gravel and autumn leaves. She stepped out wearing a tailored blazer over jeans, her silver hair in a no-nonsense bun, but her eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, and missing nothing. She hugged me with fierce, protective embrace that spoke more than words. At the small kitchen table under the cottage's dim light, I laid out my arsenal: the title deed to the house in Port Blossom, the deed to the cottage, decades of property tax receipts paid by me, utility bills in my name. I laid them out like tarot cards, predicting a future they had never seen coming. Finally, I rolled up my sleeve and showed her the burn. The skin was a raw, weeping map of their cruelty, shades of angry red and purplish blue. Isabel's face hardened into granite. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She just looked at it, then at me, and cold, controlled fury lit her eyes. This is not just disrespect, Ellie. This is assault. This is elder abuse. We're not just getting them out. We're going to make them remember your name. They just assumed. I began, my voice trailing off. I let them. That ends today, she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. Her pen began to fly across the page. Tell me everything. Every insult. Every time you felt invisible. Every time they made you feel like a ghost in your own home. Dates, if you can remember. I remember, I said softly. You don't forget the day your child tells you to disappear. And so I told her. I told her about Chloe, misplacing my heart medication, about being left alone during a winter storm while they vacationed in Hawaii, about holidays where I was relegated to a folding chair in the corner while their friends sat at the dining table I had polished for 30 years. I recounted every cut, every bruise to the soul, painting a portrait of a slow, deliberate execution of my spirit. I'm drafting an eviction notice, Isabel declared, her voice devoid of emotion. It's called a notice to quit. Given the uncontested deed and the documented abuse, no judge will even hesitate. They'll have 30 days to vacate. Can I really do that? The question was a whisper, the last gasp of the woman who was trained to keep the peace at any cost. Isabel reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her touch was firm, grounding. You must do that, Eleanor. This isn't revenge. This is a course correction. You are correcting the dangerous assumption that love means you have to endure abuse. You're not just taking back a house. You're taking back your life. That night, for the first time in years, I transferred money from my secret savings account into my checking. Enough for Isabel's fees, enough to buy a new coat, enough to remind myself that I was not helpless, not destitute, not a charity case. I was a woman of means. My own means. The eviction papers were filed the next morning at the Lincoln County Courthouse. I signed my name, Eleanor Vance, on the petitioner line. The pen felt heavy, but my hand was steady. After decades of signing birthday cards and grocery lists and permission slips, this signature carried the weight of reclamation. It was not just my name on a legal document. It was my declaration of independence from a family that had forgotten I was anything more than a convenient ghost. As we walked down the courthouse steps, Isabel linking her arm through mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the solid ground of my own power beneath my feet. They had underestimated the quiet woman who cooked their meals and folded their laundry. They had forgotten that I was the